It is Brunch, an opportunity for us to talk. As you wake up this morning, you look at the Prime Minister's assertion that Trinidad and Tobago is not bankrupt. He merely says we have to go slowly with a limited or a changed environment of revenue, and we must go slowly. The Prime Minister was at pains to make very clear that $5 billion is what is wrapped up in the 14% increase has been afforded to a number of the services, and it will take time for the government to deal with that. We will look at that and other issues as we move forward. But at the top of our minds this morning, two things. One is domestic violence, because we found out that the lady that was killed, her body was found on Friday. She was to go to court on Monday in the case of domestic violence. And unfortunately, she will not be making it. We also looking at the death of a second prison officer in a short space of time. Truth is, the Prison Officers Association expected also to take the government to court soon over its inability to protect and assure safety of officers while they are on or off duty. My next guest was close to tears when he reissued a call for some members to be moved out of crime hotspots following this earlier shooting of prison officer Fitzgerald, or that should be Victor, and this is coming on the heels of last year's murder of Senior Superintendent of Prison David Millett. My guest this morning is on his birthday today. I would normally do the celebratory thing, but we've got to be mindful of your birthday, but also be mindful that we are in some very tough situations. So let me see how I can do this gently. Gerald Gordon, who is the General Secretary and Finance Officer of the Prison Officers Association. Welcome, first of all, sir.
Morning. Not finance officer, just general secretary.
Just general secretary, all right. So yes. I sort of move you close to the purse. Not a very good idea.
Yes.
All right. Let us just say he got enough trouble across here. Don't put me next to the finance. I understand that. So happy birthday to you. The best for your day here. We are looking at a very serious and sad situation. Condolences, of course, to the family, your members and colleagues. Another tragedy sees your organization taking the government to court in prison. I cannot protect my members, so says the prison commissioner, which is frightening. I know you and I agreed that we will go into solutions this morning. This is going to be a solution-oriented conversation, but we cannot do that unless we understand what is before us right now. Give us an update as to whether there has been any discussion between you and the minister or those assigned by him. Conversation, promises, anything coming to the association in light of this another prison officer shot and killed.
Morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Morning, our members, our hard-working prison officers, members of the public, our supporters, the family of all officers who have been slain, and to date, no arrest or any of those investigations have been completed. Mm-hmm. Yesterday was day 6, today is day 7. We have decided to mark the days. Note them minutely. Mm-hmm. We have had no communication with any government official that and we take great umbrage to that. What we have had is the Prime Minister being appearing to not empathize with the fact that we have just around 3,000 or so prison officers who continue to diligently seek after the interests of the state and the public of Trinidad and Tobago. His statements were what we would deem very disrespectful to the sacrifice that officers continue to make every day. And, we'd just like to remind him, since we are in reminding mode about duty, we'd like to remind him of his duty to each and every citizen of which prison officers are also part of. We are not aliens. We form part of this great nation. We'd just like to remind the goodly Prime Minister of his duty.
You said unsympathetic.
Each and every one of us.
He did say that we are looking at a national tragedy. He did say that the government is prepared to double the efforts. And I know your president said 0 multiplied by 2 is 0, 0. I understand that. But as you yourself educated us the last time you were here, and I'm not holding a brief for, I'm merely asking for clarity here. Yes. You yourself said, this problem, Rennie, you said to me, goes back way in the 60s and even the late 50s.
Correct.
We've had a problem for a long time.
Correct.
This government is has been there for 6 months.
Correct.
And we have a very sad situation before us. But is it fair to say he has been unsympathetic?
It is fair. And I would not be removing those words. He's one of the longest serving members in the parliament as of date. Prison officers were murdered under previous PNM regimes. Why I say unsympathetic, it's simply because of this. In a time where we need to be encouraged, in a time where we need to have some sort of hope. And when we talk about redoubling to give the impression that something is happening, and we question what is happening. We don't know what is happening. We are not informed of what is happening. We have a number of solutions which we'll get into, a number of suggestions. I've stated it publicly. We are waiting. We are anxiously waiting to meet, as is our duty, to not so much talk, but to find ways to move forward. The job of a prison officer, regardless of what anyone says, is today in Trinidad and Tobago, not Gerald Gordon saying so. The facts will show that is one of the most dangerous professions one could get involved in, and we need the support of the government and the public of Trinidad and Tobago if we are to move forward.
The General Secretary of the Prison Officers Association, Gerald Gordon, is my guest. You have not had conversation, or have you had conversation at all, with the Online Ministry? I know there was a meeting called sometime late last Thursday. If you have had conversation, without disclosing what is behind the door business, give us some indication as to if your organization left any more encouraged or hopeful after that meeting.
No, the meeting we had was with our membership. It was to bring them up to speed and share with them some details of the constitutional matter that will be filed tomorrow, please God. So that's what that meeting
But
was.
I thought I recall a report that said post one of the protests in Port of Spain, there was a meeting call, a security meeting call that included your hierarchy. That is not so.
No.
All right. Let's talk about that meeting that was called, because the Express is reporting that at your meeting, the association held a meeting at a location where they, out of fear, did not have their signage outside of that building. That to me is very frightening.
No, well, I don't know what they speak of. I know in the past we have had to make some adjustments, and we say it's not out of fear, it's out of understanding the reality in which we live. And the fact of the matter is that as a responsible executive, we ought to do what we can to protect our members who from time to time will visit our offices.
You do understand, of course, my concern, my chagrin here, because that sends a very powerful message to the criminal elements that when the association that represents those who look to enforce law and order among them, and when they are so afraid to have a meeting that there is no signage out of the building for fear, they feel empowered even more so.
Yeah, but that's not true. That's
not so.
No, that's not true.
Good enough. There is a wider problem we are facing that need broader solutions. This murder reportedly was called from behind bars by a known individual. My question is, why is the prison service and the nation cowering before he and his minions, and why has he not been isolated? I think the first part of that is easy to understand. You're killing people. Of course, folks are going to be concerned, but there's a feeling of cowering, and there is the question, why has he or individuals like him not been isolated?
The fact of the matter is, I don't like to focus on the individual. As a service, we have a number of individuals. We have, and when you look at the structure and how we operate, there is something called classification. Classification in the current context, and even if we wanted to make changes, the infrastructure of the prison does not allow for proper classification, and we have seen the fallout of that in the past. The fact of the matter is that the lack of proper infrastructure, tooling, and equipment has placed the prison service in a position where it is not able to meet the challenge with the numbers to have proper classification of inmates done, proper separation of inmates carried out, not because of fear, but because of understanding that in the discharge of our duty, and one of our main things is keeping in safe custody, we cannot fully operate simply because of the limitations which we face daily.
The classification you speak of, if I understand it correctly, would put, for instance, a certain group as high-risk detainees, others as medium risk.
Yes.
The levels of risk.
Levels change, yes.
And you're saying that we don't have that situation in place.
Not as we would want to.
You have said repeatedly, and sometimes very passionately, emotionally, understandably, that we have to correct the situation in remand. Remand yard is playing a significant part in the frustration that leads to the confrontation and escalated death threats and ordered hits on your members. Make clear to our listeners, why is it when you hear of a situation in prison where a prisoner, whether it be full-time prisoner or one in remand makes a threat against an officer, what happens after that? What happens? The officer comes to goes to the hierarchy and he says, "Look, this man is threatening me, and I feel really afraid here."
What happens is at best, I would say, haphazard. It's not that nothing happens. In some cases, nothing happens because I think people have become, I guess, just tired. And fed up of the situation. The fact of the matter is there is no policy that speaks to treat with this whole issue of threats. I would correct and say that from my knowledge, the whole issue of where the threats emanate, we don't have any real challenges that are unmanageable with the convicted population. If you look at it, we have no issues. Those guys, they go to school, they work, they involve in all sorts of remedial programs as best as we are able to do. The remand population, which is probably about 60-65% of the total, they pose the greatest threat to the organization and the country, simply because, and I always say I hate repeating the same thing over and over again, but when we need to understand that an atrocity, this having someone arrested and not being convicted or acquitted, made to pay a fine, you have people, simple matters, going on for a number of years. You have people who, because of their stature in life, are unable to meet a bail that is set, so they just remain there languishing. We had, there's even a case, I don't know how true it was, they say a certain attorney was representing a dead man. And simply because you have this situation where the justice system is, and I'm saying it's not working. Because and this is where the prison officer falls in. So here he is, he comes to work, and he has to deal with these people who are angry, who are fed up, who are disgusted, who face all of this. The officer now is there along with them, facing the same challenges in the same space. And so just simply because of that situation, we are placed one against each other. And this is where so if they have to take out anything, they don't go after the judges. They don't go after the magistrates. They don't go after the attorneys. They don't go after the police. The person who they see every day,
representative of that power, of that structure,
is who they and strange enough, because we are so exposed, we have the least protection from the state. When you look at that structure, when you look from magistrate to judges to even the police officer, we are the least protected in that environment.
Let us talk about some of the solutions we can implement towards providing. But just before we start talking about the solutions, I do want to go into a point. I heard you make a point before, and it was a very good one, a wonderful analogy that speaks of the disconnect between the general populace and what is going on with prison officers. For some reason or the other, they say that is their problem, it is not my problem. And the strainer analogy I heard you articulate once, I think brings home clearly that we are all in this together.